Us back to that first Easter Sunday.
Good morning. This reading is taken Luke 24, verses 1 to 12. And it says, Jesus has risen. On the first day of the week, very early in the morning, the women took the spices they had prepared and they went to the tomb. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb, but when they entered they did not find the body of the Lord Jesus. While they were wondering about this, suddenly two men in clothes that gleamed like lightning stood before them. In their fright, the women bowed down with their faces to the ground. But the men said to them, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here. He has risen. Remember how he told you while he was still with you in Galilee? The Son of Man must be delivered over to the hands of sinners, be crucified, and on the third day be raised again." Then they remembered his words. When they came back from the tomb, they told all these things to the 11 and to all the others. It was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the others with them who told this to the apostles. But they did not believe the women, because their words seemed to them like nonsense. Peter, however, he got up and he ran to the tomb. Bending over, he saw the strips of linen lying there by themselves, and he went away, wondering to himself what had happened. This was the word of the Lord. Thank you to God.
Thanks, Jim. Well, today is the third of 3 days when we have been thinking very especially about the Easter story. We began on Thursday night at the Passover. We thought about Jesus spending that last meal with his disciples, remembering a time when the Israelites were freed from slavery and they made that journey to the Promised Land. And then on Friday, in a time of quiet reflection, at least it was quiet at St. Barnabas. I think they had a rather livelier celebration down at Christchurch in the morning. We thought about what that actually meant. And we thought again about what Jesus had actually done in dying on the cross. And all of that's important because it actually sets the scene for today. So I want you to imagine that, it's all about being in a garden in Jerusalem, which is where the tomb was. But actually, I want to shift the focus and to think about the Easter story in a very different context. Maybe it will help us to understand a little bit more about what really happened. So, can we have the first? Whoops. There we go. First picture. Right. So we have a pond. Quite a large pond, at least it's larger than the one in my back garden anyway. But like the one in my back garden, it has a fairly muddy bottom where all the leaves have fallen off the trees and they have settled there, and it's a bit dark and gloomy. But actually, it's still very much alive, because at the bottom of the pond there are lots of water nymphs swimming around in the mud. They don't know about anything else. That's the life they were born into, swimming around in the mud, searching for food, watching out for predators, things that might come and eat them. Actually, it's a bit like our world, isn't it? It's not an ideal place. It's a bit dark and gloomy, very gloomy at times, very dark at times, a bit scary at times, as we face things that perhaps we wouldn't want to face. And that's the world that the nymphs lived in. They didn't know anything else. But from time to time, one of their number would disappear. He could see them crawling up the stalk of a lily pad. And they wondered where they went, and they weren't too sure about that. And they thought, where do they go? What do they do? It all is a bit odd. Charlie was the chief of the nymphs at the bottom of the pond, and he was the one that used to fight off all the creepy crawlies that tried to eat the nymph eggs and so on. He was big and strong, and nothing was going to faze him. But one day he felt an urge, and that urge was to climb up a stalk. And he found the nearest lily pad, and he climbed up and up and up. And as he went up, he found that his body was beginning to change. And it had a hard coat developing round it. And as he got to the top of the stalk, he felt very sleepy. By this time, he was encased in right the way round with his hard jacket. And he stayed there, he wasn't sure for how long. Maybe a day, 2 days, maybe 3 days, perhaps a little longer. And it was a time for him to rest. But then came the day, in the warmth of the sun, when that hard shell around him began to crack. And he found that he could begin to move. But as he looked along his body, it was beginning to look a bit different. And he couldn't quite understand what was happening. Well, eventually, the chrysalis just came off completely. And he discovered that his body wasn't a muddy brown colour any longer, but it was a beautiful, bright blue. And what's more, he had things on his back. And he waggled them, and yes, they were wings. He'd never had wings before. And so he sat there on the lily pad, letting his wings dry out in the sun. And then he discovered he could fly. And he'd never flown before. And what he saw beneath him were, yes, the lilies from the pond, and they looked beautiful. They're lovely flowers. Some were pink and some were yellow. Some were white. And he flew on a bit further, and he saw some children playing, and they were having such fun. And he looked around, and it was such a beautiful, lovely world. He thought, wow, this is wonderful. I'm going to go back and tell my friends what a wonderful world it is up here. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't break through the water. He would just bounce off it again. And after lots of goes, and looking down and trying to wave his wings at his friends that he could see crawling around on the bottom, he realized that he couldn't do it. And so he flew off and enjoyed the world in which he now was. Easter is a time when we remember that, yes, Jesus died on the cross, And in doing that, he took the weight of all that wrong stuff that we do, all those horrible thoughts that we have, all those nasty words that we say, all those texts and things that we look at on our screens. And he took the weight of all that on himself. And he fulfilled that promise that whoever confesses their sin, they will be forgiven. So when we say sorry, as we did a little while ago, and really mean it in our hearts, Jesus takes the weight of all that. And it's as though it's all wiped quite clean again. That's what happened on the cross on Good Friday. Jesus, we know, was put in a tomb, and a big stone was rolled at the entrance. And Mary and some of Jesus' friends went to the tomb early in the morning to go and anoint Jesus' body. They'd forgotten how heavy the stone would have been that rolled across the entrance. But when they got there, the stone had been rolled back. And when they looked inside, the tomb was empty, except for 2 angels sitting there. And they said, look, if you're looking for Jesus, you're looking in the wrong place. He's not here, he's risen. They really didn't have a clue of what the angels were saying. But suddenly they began to take time to think about all those things that Jesus had taught them. And they realized that he had changed and that he was indeed alive. And in fact, a little later on, they were able to see him. But Jesus' body had been transformed, a bit like that nymph into a dragonfly. You see, the human Jesus could only be in one place at one time, like all of us. But he needed to be everywhere with everyone. And that new body was, yes, the same, but it was different. So he could be with his friends, his disciples, in the upper room, but yet on the road to Emmaus, 8 miles away, with 2 others who were going back home. He could be with crowds of people or just one person. And because his body was different, he could do things that he couldn't have done as a human being. But the important thing to remember is that Jesus did have a body. He wasn't some sort of spirit or ghost floating around in the atmosphere. He had a real body, and he could be seen. When the disciples thought he was a ghost, he said, well, look, come on, give me some fish and I'll eat it. Ghosts don't eat fish. And a few weeks later, he cooked breakfast for his friends on the shore of the Lake of Galilee. He was no ghost. He was a real but resurrected Jesus. And it reminds us that when we believe in him and make Jesus our special friend, as Frankie and Neve and Seren have done, then Jesus will be with us always. And he says, I'll never let you go. And so that cross that we thought about on Good Friday actually is now an empty cross, because Jesus has won the victory over everything that is really bad and nasty and horrid. He has conquered sin, and he has made it possible for us all to look forward, not just to a life on muddy, horrible earth. Well, it's horrible sometimes. but to enjoy the beauty of a heaven which actually even human words cannot describe. And we look forward to that. In a moment, Kizzy is going to come and to baptize the 3 girls. As she does that, it's a reminder that baptism is about dying to our old selves and saying, Jesus, I want you to make me new. Kizzy.
I can shout if need be, but I won't shout through the microphone. Sorry about that. All right, brilliant. If the parents and godparents, and most importantly, Neve and Sarah and Frankie would like to